Are you struggling to create aesthetic, closed terrariums that last a long time? Well, I've made over 100 terrariums, and in this video I'm going to give you a complete guide on all the steps to making a closed terrarium, sharing all the secrets that I use. For a closed terrarium, it's important to pick the right container. I'm going to be using this cookie jar, which has a rubber seal around the top to trap moisture and a wide opening to make our lives easier when scaping. Trust me, having a tiny opening can really test your patience. For a closed terrarium, it's very important to include a drainage layer. This is because very little moisture will escape out of the top, so any excess moisture can sit in the drainage layer rather than in the substrate. I'll be using Leaker here as it's porous and lightweight, making it perfect. On top of the drainage layer, we're going to use a substrate barrier made from window screen mesh to stop substrate falling down into the leaker. The substrate I'll be using is the same I use for all my tropical terrariums, and it includes 2 parts worm castings, 2 parts coco coir, 1 part lava rock, and 1 part sphagnum moss. This blend has the right mix of water retention, nutrition, and drainage for the tropical plants to thrive. I've sloped the substrate towards the back of the terrarium here, and this will create depth later in the build and is an essential step. For the hardscape, I'm going to start with this piece of dragonstone on the right, followed by this piece of driftwood which ended up being too large, so I chopped it and added it into the left side to look like an old tree trunk. To finish the hardscape, I added this stone path through the centre. It's now time to start planting. Because the jar is quite small, I'll be using lots of plant cuttings rather than just rooted plants. Using plant cuttings helps us add greenery into spaces that were too tricky to use before, like down the back of the dragonstone here. Using plant cuttings also allows us to multiply our tropical plants for use in multiple terrariums. Any excess leaves on the cuttings can be trimmed off, like I'm doing to this Pilea Moon Valley. After a few of the larger cuttings are in, I like to start fleshing out the scape with some moss. See it almost like a grass, but for your terrariums. Any blank empty dirt should be covered up with moss. As I add the moss, I'll keep adding cuttings as we go along, like this philodendron. The moss I collected here was from outside, and there are a few things to note when doing this. Make sure you don't take too much from an area, don't damage the area you're taking it from, and you wash the moss after, otherwise you'll likely get bugs in your terrarium that will eat up all of the plants. This is a great way to save costs, however, as moss can often be super expensive when getting it online. For the last of the major plant cuttings, I'll add in this polka dot plant. Now to complete the path, we're going to bulk it out with some lava rock sprinkled on top. I'll also add moss into a few of the empty cracks to make it look more overgrown. After a few extra Fittonia cuttings on top of the moss, I'm adding in sand to the front of the terrarium to create a mini beach area. The colour of sand will contrast really well with the vibrant green moss, and it's always a great addition. I'll go in with some extra stones and moss onto the path as well to finish this area off. After another Fittonia cutting, it's time for some climbing plants, starting with this Ficus quercifolia. I'm adding this to the edge of the path where it should happily spread across the moss and up the hardscape. I love this plant because of its tiny leaves. After this, the last plant I'll be adding to the scape is Legionella unicata, which should hopefully do the same thing. It's now time to water the scape. Pay attention to how long I'm doing this for, as what you see on screen is the only water I added to this terrarium for over 3 months. I'm using deionized water, but you can use rainwater or even tap water, and you shouldn't massively see a lack of results. The key thing is that you don't overwater the scape. Wipe down the glass after so that you can see back inside. Springtails are going to be a great addition here, as they'll eat any mould growing inside of the terrarium and add nutrition back into the soil for the plants. I then left the closed terrarium under grow lights to see what happens. The rubber seal held up well, and looking inside it looks like the terrarium and all of the plants inside are thriving. Lots of the plants have shot roots out of their stems, which often happens in humid conditions and is a sign that they're doing really well. I'm super happy with this build, and I'm sure it will continue to thrive in the future. If you want to go a step up from this and build a waterfall paludarium in your cookie jar instead, click on this video where I'll show you step by step how you can create this for yourself.